Hi, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to talk about my recollections in playing with Bob Dylan in his first electric band at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965, a long time ago. It actually started back in Chicago with my buddy Mike Bloomfield when we would go down to the South and West Sides and sit in with the great masters and learn the blues firsthand, like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, Little Walter, Jimmy Reed, Otis Rush, all the great ones, and what we learned from them and later brought to the rock and roll arena. Michael was very adamant about playing the blues, and on our adventures down to the South and West Sides, playing with Howlin' Wolf and Muddy and all those people, it was a wonderful experience for me, but I was also into rock and roll. And on Rush Street, which is sort of like the Vegas type of Chicago, there was a twist band that was looking for a keyboard player. I'm a keyboard player. And I auditioned, I got the job, and it was very like high-end, sort of, we wore different colored suits every night, purple, we colored our hair green, and whatever it took, it was a twist band. And Michael didn't understand it. He said, man, this is really not for you. You know, and after a year of being really successful and making a lot of money and going out with Playboy bunnies and going to parties with Hugh Hefner's mansion, Michael said, this is not for you. I said, what are you talking about? I'm having a great time. He said, no, you belong in Old Town, and you belong still true to the blues, playing at this club called Big John's, and you listen to me, you come with me, you have to change your whole mindset, and get deeper into the ethnic and intellectual part of life, So Michael is my mentor. Michael did introduce me to Bob Dylan later on, and to my wife Gail, and not necessarily in that order either. And so I went down, actually Michael and Paul Butterfield had been coming down to this Twist Lounge to play with us, with this band called Robbie and the Troubadours. And to them it was really unique and far out, because we were doing songs like Tossin' and Turnin' by Bobby Lewis and James Brown, Please, 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 and Jackie Wilson's Lonely Teardrops. It was really cool, Joey D's Shout. But, Michael convinced me, and we went to this club that had just started on the north side of Chicago, which actually brought the blues from the south side to the north side of Chicago, called Big John's. And the Paul Butterfield band with Michael was playing there. So Paul had asked me to sit in with them a lot, and I became the first keyboard player actually for the Butterfield band. And Paul had an offer to go with the Paul Butterfield band and Michael to Newport, Rhode Island, to play the Newport Folk Festival, and they asked me to come with them. So we all got into a car and we went to Newport from Chicago. And it was like an amazing experience for me, because we all slept in these old mansions on cots and everything. And there was Theodore Bickel and Odetta and all these great people. And Joan Baez was walking around barefooted, and I had never seen anything like that before. And it was really, really incredible experience. And next to me on the other bunk was this wonderful man, and his name was Son House. And he just sort of stayed around his little area, didn't really go anywhere. And I asked him, I said, son, why don't you go out? It's so beautiful here in Newport. He said, no need to, I'm very comfortable in my area. And I had no idea that this man was hanging out with Robert Johnson a few years ago. So anyway, that was just one little thing. And when we got to Newport, Paul's producer, who was Paul Rothschild at the time, Elektra Records, said he did not hear a keyboard with the Butterfield band, and he didn't want keyboards with the band. So I was devastated, and I was far from Chicago, a long way from home, and I was really down and depressed, and this is really the blues, and firsthand, living it firsthand. And Michael said, wait a minute, we were at this party that night, and Bob Dylan was there, and Michael had just finished a few months ago recording with Bob in New York, and they recorded Like a Rolling Stone. And Michael had played it for me in Chicago, so I was familiar with the song. So Michael started talking to Bob, and Bob said, I don't know if my band is going to show up. I would love to use the Butterfield, some of the guys from the Butterfield band. And I don't know about my keyboard player, who at that time was Al Cooper. I don't know if he's going to come. So Michael said, well, Barry's my buddy, man, and he would love to play with you, you know? And Bob said, okay, and he came up, would you like to play with me? And I said, oh man, this is when my luck changes, and this is really gonna be, it's just a complete turnaround. So I was really excited. We had a short sound check, I remember, and Peter Yarrow and Pete Seeger were really disturbed about the electric part that was going on. And at one point during the sound check, they tried to run over and chop the electric cords to prevent this thing from happening. They knew something controversial was starting to happen, and they were very uncomfortable with it. So we had a really short sound check. Al Cooper showed up. So it was the first time that there were two keyboards, you know, piano and organ. So that was a unique sound. That was something different. And then when we went on, you know, Michael turned his guitar up at 9, and we started off with Maggie's Farm, and it was just electrifying. But the folk crowd, you know, whenever you do something controversial, people aren't ready for change, you know, and this was a big change for the folk crowd. This was electric, this was rock and roll. And Bob was wearing his leather attire with a black guitar. And we went into Maggie's Farm, and then we closed with Like a Rolling Stone. And it was a mixed reaction, mostly negative. And they couldn't accept the change. But what Bob did at that time was something new, take another step in his career. It's something that he always does. And what he did at that moment was he created folk rock. And I was really proud to be a part of that. Thank you.